Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully you can all see that. So welcome, everybody. Thank you very much to all of you. I know many of you are coming from all parts of the world, which I appreciate, including Ellie or Eli in Perth. If you can, try and unmute. Mute yourselves so that we don't have any disturbances as I go, and then we'll all be able to concentrate. So the talk is Jewish Belarus 1941 to 1944, before and after the stories yet to be told. We will be going in and out of those dates, as you will see, but this is our focus. So let's orientate ourselves. So for most of you will know, but this is present day Belarus, with Minsk right in the center there, bordered by Lithuania, Poland, Ukraine, Russia, and Latvia. So let's just have a look. Now, you won't be able to see this very clearly. I'm going to bring you closer to it. But this is a map of 1938 Europe. So if we just move in here, the borders were very different. And just to say, I just said that Minsk was in the center of modern day Belarus, but you can see here, it's right on the border. So at the time in 1938, so before the invasion of Poland, before the Nazis invaded, the Germans invaded Poland, Minsk was right on the border of Poland. And I think that's very important. It's an important thing to take into account because, sorry, if I just go back to that, this area here, which you can see Grodno, Baranovichi, Brest-Litovsk, Pinsk, all of this was became part of the Soviet Union when Hitler and Stalin carved up Poland. And a lot of the Jews and non-Jews who had been living in Poland suddenly found themselves living in a very different regime, part of a communist regime. And that called up all sorts of interesting identity questions, but also it's an important element of what we're going to be talking about. So let's just consider that Belarus has a 700-year-old Jewish history. This is a whole other talk, and it's very hard to cover 700 years, but this is what we need to bear in mind when we know that what we lost in Belarus during 1941 to 1944. So just I've only taken certain highlights because we can't do it all, but it is important to orientate ourselves with this. So here we have Jews who came from Germanic lands and in the 1100s. Ashkenazi Jews have brought with them the Yiddish language. And then between the 1200s and 1400s, we had Jews who came from England, from France, from Western Europe, who moved to this territory. And of course, we know the expulsion of the Sephardic Jews in 1492, who spread out, fanned out across Europe, and some reached Poland. So some would have found themselves in these border changes. In 1648, we know that Bogdan Khmelnytsky, who was a Cossack, who was a terrible person, was responsible for the deaths of tens of thousands of Jews. This was in Ukraine, but it came into the territory that is the Belarus that we know now, and it also pushed many Jews into Belarus because they were fleeing, which expanded the towns and the villages, which caused all sorts of issues. This is, I mean, there are many religious leaders, too many to put here. I've just highlighted a few here. The Hasidic movement, which was started by the Baal Shem Tov in Ukraine, had its particular leaders in Belarus. So this is Menachem Mendel of Vitebsk, early 1700s, and this is Shneur Zalman, Rabbi Shneur Zalman, who was the founder of the Chabad movement, who came from Belarus, which was then, it was 1745, where he was born, which was then the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. What we should say also is that this territory has been many empires. The Grand Duchy of Lithuania, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, the Pale of Settlements, Tsarist Russia, Soviet Union, changing borders all the time. The Vilna Gaon here, who from Lushki, he was born in 1858, which was then the Russian Empire. Eliezer ben Yehuda, who brought, or he converted and changed Hebrew from an ancient language to or religious language to a modern language, and the Hebrew that we know today. In 1881, there was the assassination of Tsar Alexander II, which was blamed on the Jews. It wasn't, there was one Jew who was in a larger group of the people who were responsible, but of course it was blamed on the Jews. And that led to waves of bloody pogroms, which started from 1881 and then carried on later in 1903, 1906, into the 1920s. And here we have, of course, as a result, we have Zionism, we have the rise of Zionism. And here we have this picture here, you can't actually see, but this person here where my arrow is Menachem Begin in Brest-Litovsk around 1931 with revisionist, the Beitar revisionist Zionists, who were the militant Zionists ready to fight. And then we have the Bund, who were the Jews who didn't believe in Zionism, who believed in making change through the political system. And as we know, in 1941, on the 22nd of June, in 1941, Hitler breaks his pact with Stalin with a surprise turn of face and invades the Soviet Union. And in the Soviet Union, it was a Holocaust by bullets, but in particular areas, but in particular in Belarus, there was a very strong partisan movement where Jews fought back, Jews escaped ghettos. And we have Tamara, as I said, with us, who is the expert in this field. But it's an important part of the story in Belarus. There were hundreds of wooden synagogues, all destroyed now, and some beautiful stone buildings, some of which still stand, but we'll come to that. Belarus brought us important art, musicians, Chaim Soutine, Marc Chagall. This is Udel Pen, who was he was not Belarusian, but he came to Vitebsk and he was Marc Chagall's teacher. We have Leon Bakst, who was born in Grodno, which at the time, or before 1941, before 1939, was, as we said, Poland, but became part of the Soviet Union today in modern day Belarus. And he became he left the country and he went to Paris and became the set designer and the costume designer for the Belarus. And of course, we have Irving Berlin, Eddie Rosner, who was a German trumpeter. He was the Satchmo, but he came to Belarus. He came to Minsk, and he made Minsk the jazz capital of the Soviet Union. But because of the history and because actually of the Soviet history, no one really knows about him. And of course, Belarus gave us the founding fathers of Israel, all of whom either came from Belarus or had ancestry in Belarus. So Belarus is a very important part of our Jewish lives. I'm going to just read you something here. It's a quote from Bloodlands by Timothy Schneider. And he said, "How do we even begin to try to understand the Holocaust in its entirety? The full story from beginning to end? In truth, the Holocaust for most people conjures images of the death and concentration camps of Poland and Auschwitz-Birkenau, the focus of Hitler's final solution. Film footage, photographs, survivor testimonies, and eyewitness accounts from the liberating forces in Poland ensured that these places would never be forgotten. But what of the atrocities where no liberating forces ever reached and where hardly anyone survived? What about the citizens of the Soviet Union who did return from camps, hiding places, forests, but never told of their suffering or losses, because to do so risked persecution or incarceration? What of the lands between Poland and Moscow, that battleground and its people, the places no one talks of because no one knows what happened there? Auschwitz was the final solution, which in itself tells us there had been other solutions. What were they, and why don't we learn about them? And I think that's really important, really important. There is so much about Belarus that we still don't know, and the world is yet to find out. So here we can see the German-Soviet military parade in Brest-Litovsk, and I think this is a very significant photograph. This was 1939. It was an official ceremony held by the troops of Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union on September the 22nd, 1939, during the invasion of Poland. And it marked the withdrawal of German troops to the demarcation line secretly agreed to in the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, and handover of the city and its fortress to the Soviet Red Army. So here they were allies. They were the Germans are handing it over here to the Red Army. Here we are. Here's your bit of Poland. We'll leave you to it. But in 1941, as we said, on the 22nd of June, 1941, Operation Barbarossa went into action. So this was its original name was Operation Fritz. It was the code name for the invasion of the Soviet Union. And it was Operation Barbarossa was the largest land offensive in human history, with over 10 million combatants taking part. It was an 1,800-mile front, 600,000 motor vehicles were involved, and over 600,000 horses. And it was, as you can see, it was a Holocaust by bullets. It was a very different sort of attempt of annihilation on the Eastern Front. So these here are the this A, B, C, and D is off the picture, but behind the Wehrmacht, the German army, came the Einsatzgruppen, who fanned out in different directions, here you can see. And their mission was to annihilate the Jews. And here you can see B that went across Belarus and following the Wehrmacht, who were heading for Moscow. Now, you can see that here we've got Lithuania and here we've got Ukraine. And it is public knowledge that Lithuanians were collaborators with the Nazis, as were the Ukrainians. In Belarus, it was there were collaborators, and we're going to come on to that, but it was in a very different story. And as you can see that it's Belarus is, I always say that Belarus's geography is its curse, because it is really the gateway from Europe to Russia or the Soviet Union towards Moscow. And Belarusians also suffered terribly. It was a land grab. It was you know, the German army, the Nazis really weren't care. They didn't care. They wanted to grab the land. So here we have the Wehrmacht coming through Pruzhany. It's a very powerful picture. You know, little wooden villages, shtetls, you know, this powerful army trundling through you know, this huge offensive coming into across the country in June of 1941. And it took everybody by surprise. And just to stop here to say that Pruzhany was the birthplace of Joseph Ber Soloveitchik, who was one of the rabbis of the 200-year dynasty of rabbis. He was born in 1903 in Pruzhany, which was then part of Imperial Russia, then became Poland and now Belarus. In 1926, he moved to Berlin, and then in 1932 to Boston, USA, where he established his yeshiva there. So he fortunately is survived this. So let's just have a little word about collaborators. Yes, there were collaborators. I think it's an interesting point to note here that going back to that, the changing border and the part of Poland that became part of the Soviet Union, and just thinking about religious Jews and Poles who found themselves now living suddenly under communism, which was hugely challenging. Their businesses would have become nationalized. Jews would have been asked to, or forced to, it would have been part of their to live. They would have had to have worked on Saturday, and they didn't want to because it was more important for them to pray. So that it was hard for them to hold down work. And then in comes the invading German army. And so there would have been people there, local people there who were non-Jewish Poles who would have wanted to say, well, I don't want to be part of this communism. I'd rather be part of the, Western Europe. We'll fight with you. And of course, with that came everything that they asked them to do. So there were all these really important nuances to take into account. There was nothing like in Ukraine and Lithuania, where locals were, openly willing to sort of do the bidding of the Nazis. There were collaborators. I'm not going to take away from that. But Lithuanians and Ukrainians came into Belarus to help deal with the annihilation of the Jewish community. Here you can see some of these collaborators here with their poster of Hitler, and here they are again. And here you can see a parade which is outside of the government building, which is in Minsk. This synagogue, this church, this red church, it's a red brick church, is still standing, and this is a very iconic building, which is the government building in Minsk. And here you can see the German army taking control here, and here are the collaborators walking past that building, and here you can see the swastika hung on the government building. So let's talk a little bit about the Minsk ghetto. So the Minsk ghetto was, it was supposed to have had a wall built around it. It never was. It was one of the biggest ghettos in Europe and one of the most brutal, but very little is known about it. We are finding out more and more about it because we are translating books, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But literally you can see this is the territory that was the Minsk ghetto. Little wooden, low-level buildings, wooden buildings, where over 100,000 Jews were imprisoned. In the end, it ended up having a barbed wire around it, and so it was a porous ghetto, and so Jews could get in and out at great risk. It was hugely dangerous, and many of the people who were doing that were children. But there was an underground movement that formed in the ghetto, and there were people escaping the ghetto to get out to partisan units. It was hugely risky, but the people who they sort of say are survivors of the Minsk ghetto, they survived because they escaped, and they had to have a weapon, which was, how do you have a weapon when you're in a ghetto? But a lot of children were sneaking out, getting out for food and for arms to bring them back to equip the people who were planning to escape. Here you can see the German army coming in 1941, coming through the villages. Again, very terrifying pictures. Here you can see a column of prisoners of war that were captured near Minsk, who are being marched west. So these are Red Army soldiers who were brutally treated, starved to death in many cases. And Minsk was razed to the ground. I mean, it was hugely destroyed. So let's just go through these pictures and you can see the absolute devastation of Minsk. Now, Jews in Minsk ghetto, as in the Slonim ghetto, as several other ghettos in Belarus, didn't wear yellow stars. They wore various markings, but they were there was a decree by the Nazis that they said that they were making mistakes by shooting the wrong people. So they marked them with a yellow circle on their front and their back. And this was that for everybody over the age of 10 years old. Here is a picture. It's an original picture that's been colorized, and you can see here the Jews wearing the yellow circles. Thanks to quite extraordinary software that you can get now, we've taken these three people here. And we've enlarged their faces and brought them to high resolution, which I think is a very powerful thing to do. You can really see, what's the suffering in their faces and in their eyes, and you can see here wearing the yellow circles. Incidentally, in Yad Vashem, those of you who've been to Yad Vashem, there is a wall of stars, all the different yellow stars that were worn by Jews in the ghettos across Western Europe. And at the moment, there is no yellow circle. So this really is hidden history. So Jews were forced to do slave labor until they were shot. There are very few Jews in Belarus were it was Holocaust by bullets, and it wasn't really a case of using them as slave labor in the same way as it was in Western Europe. But while they had them and while they were dealing with them, they were used and they were humiliated, as you can see. So here's one of the brick buildings in the ghetto, and you can see here the warning in German and in Russian, and here you can see the barbed wire fence. And Belarus, the Minsk ghetto was horrendously brutal, beyond words. The books that we're translating are really hard to translate, actually. There were more and more Western Jews who were being brought from Austria and Germany to the Minsk ghetto, and in order to make room for them, they were just slaughtering the Belarusian Jews to make space for them. And some of the Jews that came to Minsk from Germany and from Austria were parents of the children that came to the UK on the Kinder transport. So this is a picture of Frida Reisemann, who was a little girl. I believe she was 6 when the war started, and she was a prisoner of the ghetto. She survived. This is her after the war, and this is her today. And we have made a film of her talking about the ghetto. We call her the guardian of the ghetto. She still lives in Minsk. She's never left. She is the chairwoman of the Minsk Ghetto Survivors Association. And I'm just going to play you a short, just a 1-minute clip from the film that we made.
Этот же парк, он был, да?
Скверик был скверик. Здесь маленький был заборчик, даже после войны. Я его хорошо помню, этот скверик. Это же центр гетто был. Но как здесь висели мужчины, женщины, висели, чтобы сказать, сутками-то мало. Неделями не разрешали снимать. Я знаю, моей подруги мама, мать 5 детей, 5 махоньких детей у нее было. За что ее здесь повесили. И дети вот здесь вот рядом жили, возле еврейского кладбища, и они видели повешенную мать.
So in the Minsk ghetto, there were they were trying to find efficient ways to murder Jews, it was an expensive and stressful process to be shooting Jews at the rate that the Einsatzgruppen and the German, the Nazis were doing so. And so it was declared that they needed to find more effective ways. And so they started to test different ways, and one of which was by use of gassing people in the backs of vans, such as this. These were called dushegubki, and they were bringing them into the Minsk ghetto. And here we can hear again from Frida talking about that.
Я слышал, что в Минске впервые немцы применили мобильные душегубки, так называемые, мобильные газовые камеры. Ты вообще как ребенок их видела? Ты вообще представляла, что это такое?
Я их видела вот здесь в первом погроме.
Что это было такое? Как
обычные машины. На вид посмотришь, обычная машина. И мы не знали, что это душегубки. А потом уже узнали.
И как это выглядит? То есть садили в них людей?
Да.
Кузов?
В салон загоняли людей. Ну, сколько там? 20-30, я не знаю. И запускали этот газ, и все. А вываливали уже трупы.
А куда их выводили? Их
выводили в первый погром в Тучинке, остальные в Тростинце.
So in the ghetto, there is a pit that's here. This place is called Yama, which means pit. Here you can see a very powerful sculpture, a monument here, memorial. And right here in the center, it's quite hard to see it, but there is an obelisk to mark what happened here. Here are 5,000 Jews were shot in this pit here. Now, if you look around here, it's hard to imagine that, you know, what that might have looked like. You know, here you've got all these modern buildings around it, but I can show you a picture here. This is what it looked like. This is the obelisk was installed by survivors after the war, and it literally is a ditch. So Jews were driven down the ditch and shot here. Now here you can see there are no modern buildings. You can see the little wooden houses that were, you know, the houses of the ghetto, which again is a very telling picture. And here you can see that sculpture, that memorial called The Last Way at Yama. So Frida spoke about Trostinets. So this is an extermination camp, it's a death camp, but it wasn't a camp that anybody ever spent a night at, because people were either brought here already dead, or they were shot here. In 2015, it became a memorial complex, which is it is a developing memorial complex. It's more parts of it have been added to in recent years, and is open for visitation. And here you can hear Frida speaking about Trostinets.
Фрида, дорогая, расскажи нам про это место, куда мы сейчас приехали. Как твоя жизнь, твоя судьба связана с этим местом? Я смотрю, что здесь вот написано, что вот на этих вагонах, на таких вагонах привозили евреев. Но это, наверное, привозили евреев из Европы.
Из Европы.
Называемых гамбургских.
Угу. Их привозили сюда и здесь убивали. А маленьких детей, как нам рассказывали люди, которые здесь жили, крестьяне, маленьких детей на штыки и в яму, на штыки и в яму. Вот. А наших гетто, здесь лежит все гетто, кроме первого погрома. Первый погром лежит в Тучинке, а остальных сюда привозили мертвых уже.
То есть их уничтожали либо по дороге, либо в гетто?
Либо в гетто, да. И здесь уже они мертвые. Их всех спалили, как я понимаю. Их всех спалили.
То есть здесь их сжигали, здесь их сжигали.
После войны ЧГК работала и вывела такую цифру: 256 тысяч здесь человек погибло. А из них больше половины Минского гетто евреев. Больше половины. Здесь лежит где-то пепел моего брата, среднего, ему было всего 16 лет.
And here is a very, very imposing, very big memorial at the site of the Trostinets extermination camp, which opened in 2015. And it's double-sided. You could walk around it. It's enormous and very, very powerful, as you can see. So let's talk a little bit about the Jewish partisans. So the partisan movement, as I said, was it was very big. There were Jews took to the forests where they could. They understood that they could navigate the dense forest in the Nalaboki forest. Was very dense, and it was the locals knew how to find their way through it. The most famous that we know of here are the Bielskis. We'll talk about a few others here, but this is a fantastic picture of the Belarusian partisans on the road in Belarus in 1944. Here again, sorry, I missed that one. This is a colorized photo. Belarusian partisans. Here you can see a partisan, very young, laying a mine to blow up a railway line, and the partisans disrupted the Nazi war machine by blowing up trains. They were very effective fighters. They made a real difference. And it was harsh, it was a harsh existence, not only the getting out of a ghetto, but also getting from the ghetto with partisan scouts to the partisans. And even when you got there, you weren't necessarily going to be accepted. So it was highly difficult, highly dangerous. And then, of course, you had to survive by living in the forest. Tamara, who is on, played a huge role in the establishment of the Museum of Jewish Resistance in Novogrudok. And you can see it's a fantastic little museum where you can see what the prisoners of the labor camp in Novogrudok, how they would have been imprisoned, and also tells the story of the tunnel escape. So Jews who actually dug a tunnel and escaped. And got to the partisans. There's a very well-known partisan survivor called Jack Kagan, who was very instrumental in creating this museum, and Tamara played a huge role in doing the research and actually tracking the trajectory of the tunnel, and we are hoping that she will be giving us giving a separate talk about that in March. And here you can see a picture of the Bielski partisans. And just to say, this is a rather fantastic story. This is a picture of a girl called Mishla Sosnowski. This Jeanette Joss, who lives in Cambridge, this is her family photograph album. Her family, her parents left Novogrudok, left that area in 1931 and brought with them their photograph album. Not realizing that 10 years later the family they left behind would have been killed. In the photograph album was this picture of Myśla Sosnowski. We think that it was possibly, she was dressed up as a Purim angel. She grew, as a young woman, she was caught up in the war and was, she didn't survive. But that photograph later became a beautiful statue and stands outside the Museum of Jewish Resistance as a memorial to all the children who were killed in the Holocaust. It's a really quite stunning memorial, very unusual memorial. And I'd like to just stop here. There's also a fantastic book also about a survivor from Novogrudok, written by Michael Skaken, who is an author in New York, who I had the pleasure of meeting last September. You can see here a little write-up here by Henry Kissinger saying a harrowing tale of mental agility, supreme courage and considerable luck. And if you wanted to have a read of something of a really quite extraordinary story of survival, I would recommend the book. But there were other partisan units, and this one was quite an extraordinary one that I found out about. We were translating, we're reworking a book, which I'll talk about the Minsk ghetto, a survivor's story. And in the back of the book, there was this photograph. This is Shalom Zorin, who was the commander of the 106th Partisan Brigade that was in the Naliboki Forest. And it was an unusual partisan brigade because he was a survivor of the Minsk ghetto, and he started a family camp. So he was saving children and elderly, which a lot of the other partisan brigades wouldn't take. And I said to Tamara, I wanted to know where it was and I'd like to visit it. And she said, well, you can't get to it. It's far deep in the forest. You need SUVs. It's very difficult to find. And I said, well, can you find it? And she said, yes. And I said, I want to go. And here we are. We made it. We got there. This is me with two of my youth workers. Here is Jeanette Joss and one of our volunteers. And Tamara was with us. We also had the British ambassador with us as well. So really quite an extraordinary day that was. And it really was deep in the forest. And it marks the site where they were camped. And actually there were some very sad losses because they made it through the war, and as they were finally at the end of the war, they returned to Minsk, and as they were returning, there were Germans still retreating, and there was a battle in the forest. Shalom Zorin was wounded. He survived, obviously, here he is, but several of the partisans were killed, very sadly. So I just want to show you some of the synagogues because they are important, and it shows the richness of the Jewish life that was there. So this is the Slonim synagogue that was built in between 1635 and 42. It was the Slonim synagogue was at the center of the Minsk ghetto. It was part of the part of the Slonim ghetto. It was turned into a storage space for arms and that were being collected, just as a few statistics here, in 1939, the population of Slonim was 25,000, the actual population of the town. 17,000 of them were Jews. The Jewish population in Slonim swelled to 22,000, from 17,000 to 22,000 by 1941, with Jews fleeing Poland, seeking refuge in the east. Slonim, before 1939, Slonim had been a part of Poland. When Stalin and Hitler divided Poland in 1939, the eastern part of Poland, including Slonim, fell under the control of the Soviet Union, as I said earlier. Jews fleeing German-occupied Poland thought they would find safety in the Soviet Union, but this proved futile when Hitler broke his pact and invaded the Soviet Union in June 1941. By the end of 1942, almost all of the Jews of Slonim had been murdered. According to the Encyclopedia of the Holocaust, some 22,000 people died in the Slonim ghetto. It is said that around 200 survived. They were escapees of the ghetto and they became partisans in the forest. So that building still stands, which I'll show you a picture of at the moment. But here you can see, this was market day. Here's a Jewish trader. So this is what it might have looked like before the war. So the building is in very poor condition. It is still standing. It is desperately in need of support and restoration. But I just think it's important that you see what it looks like inside today. It's absolutely, it's very abandoned, but very beautiful. And you can still see very beautiful, parts of the building. It's a real heritage asset. I'm just going to show you a very short film that we made in 2018, which really does show you what the condition of the building is now. Oh, apologies. Sorry, we'll have to start that again. So as you can see, it's in a poor state. Just to say that you will have seen 2 yellow warnings and some chairs, and that was because we were. I was there in 2018 with running a summer program, and we had prepared a Belarusian boy for bar mitzvah, and we couldn't obviously do it in the Slonim synagogue, so we were outside on the territory, on the perimeter, and it was the first bar mitzvah of a Belarusian Jewish boy there since before the war. So it really was a piece of history. So also, I think it would be wrong not to sort of show you what was lost, sort of intangible heritage. This is the Zanim-Monastskaya synagogue in Grodno in 1926. As I said, the wooden synagogues are no longer in Belarus, but they really were quite beautiful, as you can see inside. They were really quite something, all destroyed, very, very sadly. But I think we have to acknowledge, really, it shows the richness of the Jewish communities that were lost. So let's go to the Bronaya Gora massacre site. It's a massacre site where 50,000 Jews were murdered. It's very little known. You can see that it was an obvious place to massacre Jews. There's a sort of central junction of railway lines, and off there in Bronaya Gora runs a single solitary railway line through the forest. And as you can see, with an open clearing. So it was a very easy place to take Jews in railway carriages, have them come out and shoot them. And this is where 50,000 Jews were killed. And there are sort of a couple of very tiny little modest stone memorials to mark, the site. So here is Artur Lifshitz, who's my co-founder of the Together Plan. We're standing at, me walking the railway line here. This is one of the memorials. And this is a slightly more contemporary one. And it says here, in memory of the 50,000 citizens of Jewish nationality from the Soviet Union and West Europe bestially murdered by the Nazis in the time of the Holocaust during the Great War for the defense of the homeland, 1941 to 1945. There is some conversation going on around maybe making a more significant memorial site here, which it definitely should be, but that's future. So let's just go to the Brest Jewish Cemetery now. This is the Brest-Litovsk Synagogue, which today is a cinema. And so you can still see the edifice here. It's been wrapped by this glass structure. So it's the local Brest cinema. Brest was as I said at the beginning, the birthplace of Menachem Begin. Until recently, there was nothing on this building to say it was a synagogue, but now there is a marking. This was the cemetery. It was a very well-established cemetery, it was completely destroyed. It today looks like this. It is a running track. This is not unique to Brest. It happened throughout the Soviet Union. Jewish cemeteries were destroyed, they were built on. But there's an interesting story here. So one of our, we have connection to the grandson of this person, Vladimir Gubenko, who is the artist of some of the pictures I'm going to show you, in a book that he created that tells the story of the Jews between the 1930 and 1960. So here you can see that Cossacks who were serving the Germans were robbing Jewish graves in 1943. And so this was started the first sort of destruction of the cemetery. Then we have Germans clearing the cemetery to install sound detectors. And so more headstones were removed, more of the cemetery destroyed. Now this is the Felix Warburg colony. You can't actually see what it says there, but it was called the Felix Warburg colony that was built by the American Joint Distribution Committee. After the Second World War, the state of the Jewish community in Brest was terrible, and the American distribution committees pumped money into building this new colony, which included an orphanage for a lot of the children who no longer had parents, and to look after them. So it was very, it was a lovely new suburb. I was there in 2014 and 2015, and the houses were about to be destroyed. They were all derelict. Now this colony has a very important story to tell during the war. To start with, when the Germans invaded. To start with, I should say that it was a prisoner of war camp First, it was a prison of war camp for Soviets. When the Germans invaded, they put Soviet prisoners in here and starved them. And then when the Germans then started to lose the war and the Red Army took back the territory, they then put the German prisoners of war in there. But by this time, there was such a terrible problem with hygiene around the colony houses that they needed to do something about it. So they ordered the German soldiers in the prisoner of war camp to go to the cemetery, made them rip off the headstones, and they laid them all around the houses. And when I came in 2014 and 15, when we were visiting those houses, we were finding some of those headstones. This is a photograph that I took in 2014. This was actually an area where they were digging foundations for a new supermarket, and we got a call and said we'd found a lot of headstones, and this is when I took that photograph. The headstones have been found for the last 20 years all around the region, and it's been a long process, but in 2020 we signed an agreement with the local authorities to have an exclusive agreement to photograph every single one of them and to create a database, which is now done, and to build a memorial. So by the middle of next year, hopefully we will have the opening of a memorial which will be using all of these headstones. And there are over 1,200 pieces. And here you can see the team on a very hot day last year photographing them for the database. So I've only touched on a little bit. Obviously, I can't take you across into everything, but I'm going to sort of now take you to the present. And to our plans to building a better future. So just to say, what is the Together Plan? The Together Plan's mission is a community capacity building charity. We're working in the former Soviet Union countries, but we're focused on Belarus, and we are a dedicated charity working to better civil society. How do we do that? Well, we're building a Jewish cultural heritage route in Belarus, which is a citizen-led civil society initiative. We're translating and publishing books that would otherwise have been lost and forgotten. We're educating by bringing the story of the Soviet Jews killed in the Holocaust into focus. We're connecting Jewish people all over the world to their ancestry. We're sending humanitarian aid to the poorest in society. We're actually now, this is a new line in what we're doing. We're helping to support Ukrainians fleeing the war where we can. And we engage young adults in our Youth for Youth program. So the Together Plan has been a member of the European Association for the Preservation and Promotion of Jewish Heritage and Culture since March 2019 to build the Jewish Cultural Heritage Trail in Belarus. So as I said, we translate and publish books and memoirs written by Jews who survived the Holocaust in the Soviet Union. And this is a vital resource for education and research. So We Remember Lest the World Forget is already in publication. This book is in its final stages. We are hoping to be able to bring that to publication in the next couple of months. An absolutely fascinating book written by Anna Machis, who was she was a very important member of the underground movement and the resistance in the Minsk ghetto. Most people will never have heard of her, but she escaped and she wrote what she had witnessed in the ghetto on a typewriter in the forest. And her nephew Leonid, who was a baby, those memoirs were then locked away by the KGB but have since been released. And those memoirs are now part of that book. So it really is quite a very special book. And this book, Minsk Ghetto, The Truth, is the book where we found the picture of Shalom Zorim. It is available, but it's a very, very poor translation. So we are currently reworking that. And I just wanted to show you this picture. This is the British Embassy hosted in 2018 the launch of the book We Remember, and here you can see some of the survivors who had penned their memoirs in the book. They said that they'd never thought it was possible. They never thought their stories would be heard to be available to the English-speaking world. And when I first met these people, they were very closed. They were not like this, and it really goes to show that we can empower people to have a voice. This was a very important moment for us. We've also created a Holocaust education program for young learners called Making History Together. It is a safe introduction to the Holocaust by discovering the hidden history of the Jews of Belarus. And it's actually it's more successful than we thought it would be. We didn't know. We created it in 2020. It's also a fascinating journey of self-development and growth for young people. And here you can see some of our first year group who were amazing. And these are the packs that we send out by post. And we're starting our next program hopefully on the 26th of February. So if anybody has any 13 or 14-year-olds who might want to join, we'd love to hear from them. And we actually had a participant from the United States join us last year. So, distance is no object because we run the program on Zoom. And there is now an exhibition that we've created as part of the program. It's a traveling exhibition. This was we showed it at a synagogue in North London in January, beginning of this month, and this week it is at a school. This is it up at the school. The school have been absolutely blown away by it, and we're very excited that it's now traveling. Now, this program has inspired or seeded the Making History Together program in Belarus, which is exactly why we started it, which we're very excited about. We have a college in Minsk who are working with us to develop the program, and the students who are not Jewish have been so inspired to discover their local history that they have now taken up a pledge to do social action. So here you can see them. They were digging holes to plant trees at the site of the Jewish cemetery that was on the territory, within the territory of the Minsk ghetto. And they've created an alley of trees. That park is just a public park now. There's nothing to mark it to say that it was a Jewish cemetery, but now there are plaques there saying in honor of underground heroes, partisans and prisoners of the Minsk ghetto. So they are doing this. They're taking the lead, which is why everything we do is around capacity building. And actually, I was hoping I might have a photograph to share with you, because right now, they are just concluding in Belarus an event at the college where they've had 250 people. They've had a Holocaust Memorial Day event, and they have had dignitaries from the embassies, the British embassy. I think they've got the ambassadors from British, Austrian, German, Japanese, Italian, Azerbaijan, Moldova, Armenian, and the Russian embassy, and the Belarus Minister of Culture is there as well. They literally, as I've been sitting here speaking to you, a photograph has just come through, which I will put on social media after this Zoom. So you will be able to see the impact of what's happened there, which is quite extraordinary. We offer an archive search service where we're helping people to get access to the records in the archives in Belarus. So, and I know some of you who are on this call we've already done searches for. And we also, oops, too many clicks. We also send humanitarian aid to Belarus. We have a fantastic team of volunteers who are incredibly dedicated. You can see some of them here. We will be loading another lorry hopefully in February, and we are able to send aid that goes out not just to the Jewish communities, but to the wider non-Jewish community. But we are able to get resources to community centres, including Judaica, because there's no Judaica, you can't buy it in Belarus. And I think it would be wrong to not sort of also say at this point that we are have also been able to help Ukrainians in Moldova and Poland over the last year. So here you can see some of the communities that are now part of the Jewish Cultural Heritage Route building and around the country. So this is Gomel, this is Polotsk, this just a couple of the pictures. So here they're doing some research, they're connecting to their traditions. So this is all as a result of the work that we're now doing in the country. And here is one of our summer programs. We have Vlad, who has cerebral palsy, who is now empowered and has been on one of our youth training programs, and he now runs an arts and crafts program. We're doing some care in the community. This is run by members of community, and we work with ghetto survivors. This is the Stas, who were bar mitzvahed on the territory of the Finchley Synagogue, and we're working with people with disabilities as well. So really, we're working in all parts of the community. So we're close to the end of this talk, but in early last year, some artwork appeared. Now, in the 1990s, after the fall of the Soviet Union, there was a competition that was run in Minsk with art students on the theme of asking them to paint pictures on the theme of the Holocaust. And after that competition had finished, the art came down and the pictures were put away and lost. Nobody ever knew that they would ever be found. And they were found, and they were going to be thrown away until somebody offered them to Frida, the chairwoman of the Minsk Ghetto Survivors Association, and said, "We're about to throw these away, do you want them?" And she said yes, and she brought them to Artur, who is, as I said, my co-founder, and he's our director in Belarus, and he had them restored and framed and created a traveling exhibition that has visited schools around Belarus, came to the National Library in Minsk, and they have the exhibition today in the college where the dignitaries are, the diplomats. And I'm going to show you some of those pieces of art here. I'm going to, as I said at the beginning of this talk, there are going to be moments where there will be silence. And as I said, there is power in the silence. I will linger on each picture so that you can just think and take in these pictures. And at the end, we will light a virtual candle and there will be a short piece of music. After that, there'll be a slight silence, and then I'll take you on to a final slide. You can then leave if you want to. If you want to stay, ask me any questions, please do. So let's go. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. If anybody would like to ask me anything, please do, or tomorrow.
May I?
Gloria, yes.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, there were two things, so we're going to have forgotten the second one. The first one was the amount of Jews that were massacred in forests and wherever, you know, was that number also taken into the Nazi numbers when they talked about the concentration camp? Because you mentioned something like 50,000 in one place alone. I mean, and there were so many of them. Was that included in the calculations?
In the 6 million?
Mm.
Well, what I can tell you is that it is said that that the 2.7 million Jews were killed in the Soviet Union. And it was that was the Holocaust by bullets. So it's a figure that not a lot of people are aware of. You know, most people think about the sort of concentration camps and the you know, the death camps and Auschwitz and, you know, the what happened in the Soviet Union and the extent of the numbers in the Soviet Union, which includes Belarus, but it also includes Latvia and Lithuania and Ukraine. That's 2.7 million. So yeah, number.
Thank you.
Susan.
The 2.7 million reflected in the 6 million, or is it in addition to?
No, it's included, I believe. Yeah, within. Yeah. There was another hand. I saw another hand. Arlene.
I just wanted to say thank you very much for a very moving and very educational talk. It was really very good. Thank you. In Latvia, for example, there were 70,000 Jews at the beginning of the war and 3,000 at the end. And they shot 25,000 in Rumbala. They shot another 40,000 in Bierniki, which they imported from Europe. So I think although the numbers are included, I think there are many, many more than the actual number.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's almost impossible really to know, you know, and I think that the record keeping that was going on in the concentration camps, you know, it was much more, you know, I think that was more meticulous in Western Europe than it was in the Soviet Union, I have to say. So yeah, Arlene, by the way, everybody is Latvia, Special Interest Group, Jewish Genealogical Society. So Latvia is her speciality. Yeah, thanks, Arlene.
Pleasure.
Eli.
Yeah, hi. Yes, thank you very much for that presentation. As always, you do things very professionally. Can you give us a quick perspective of Belarus today? Because from our position here in Australia, it's not very good. And of course, all the issues with Ukraine and Europe against Russia and Belarus. How are you working there?
Working there because we've got a fantastic team there. So there's Tamara, and we have Artur, and we have Sonia, and we have Vasily. Actually, it was before the war, during COVID, I couldn't get out there. So we, Artur and I had a very long conversation. I said, guys, you're going to need to kind of step up, and we came up with all sorts of project ideas. Being part of the European Association for the Preservation and Promotion of Jewish Heritage and building the cultural route is being done with sort of me being the director from here, and they're doing the work on the ground. So Tamara, for example, has just been working on the creation of an audio tour on Novogrodok. They're doing the research, they're doing working on telling the story, and we've got communities. We've got heritage clubs now coming on board in different communities, because that's what it's about. We're about identifying the communities, giving them, playing a role in this, because when ultimately this awful war is over, people will start traveling, and they will be able to go, and they'll be able to meet with the people who are doing the work, who will be able to proudly take them on the tour of their local village or their local town. Ultimately it will be a sort of a self-sustainable, sustainability. It'll be a self-sustaining project. That's the aim. In terms of how we're working, the authorities are supporting what we're doing. For example, the Making History Together exhibition that I was talking about, we are making a second exhibition at the moment in the Russian language that we'll be sending to Belarus. Now, the only way that we're going to get it there is to have the Belarusian authorities a stakeholder. Getting something of that size to the country is we're never going to do it unless we've got their blessing. And it's difficult, it's sensitive material, and so we have to get the language right. So at the moment, we have translated it, and it's about to go to the Belarusian embassy here in the UK, who I've had meetings with, who have agreed to be part of it. They haven't said no. I'm giving them editorial rights to change things if they need to, and then it will be designed, and then they'll get to sign it off. And then I said to them, would you please give me a document that says it has free sort of blessed passage across the border, and we'll get it there. So, and it will really, there's no official Holocaust education in the country currently, although the work that has been done sort of locally, like with Tamara's work with the Jewish Partisans Museum, little pockets of work that's going on. But this will be a traveling exhibition that will go all around the country to schools and to libraries, where they will be able to springboard Holocaust education off it. So that's how we're working.
A couple of years ago, you remember some lady took over the ownership or whatever of the Finchley Synagogue. What happened with that?
It's gone back to the authorities. She doesn't know. That she was that she took ownership of it with the sort of promise that she had to do something with it over a certain period of time, and it never happened. So it's now gone back to the authorities.
And is there any movement and anything happening with it? Unfortunately,
not yet. But not. We now have as Susan knows, we've got an American charity now based in North Carolina, where Susan is, and that is that has a similar remit to the Together Plan, but it's also got a bigger remit in that it can fundraise for restoration projects. So there's who knows, we may find the support for restoring that building, which I would love to be able to do.
and Grodno, because that synagogue had come a long way from what it was originally. It looked pretty good.
So the Grodno synagogue, so what, the one that you saw?
Yes, when I was there for the deal.
Right, that one. So that was that's been very well restored. I believe that was done under the support of the Chabad. So the Chabad are there. That not there. No, Tamara. Who did that one? I know the Chabad are there now.
What's Chabad? I think it was Chabad.
So there was a private funder, a person, just one person who is a businessman from Grodno. He has his own factory there, which produces furniture, and he invested his own money. He donated his own money for the restoration of the synagogue. It took years, dozens of years, but at the moment it's in good shape.
Yeah.
And it's got a little museum there, right? It's still
there is a problem with the museum because originally it was independent. Then it became part of the State Museum of the History of Religion. After a couple of years, the museum said, we don't want it anymore. So now Boris Kwiatkowski, who used to be in charge of the community, he now gives tours at the museum, takes care of it. So not a good perspective for the museum, I believe.
I'm sorry, Deborah, I just remembered what I wanted to ask you. These drawings and paintings that you now have, are you going to have an exhibition there? Excuse me. Are you going to have an exhibition in Belarus? I mean, how many are there?
There are, I don't know the actual number. I think there are about 30. I'm not sure the actual number. It's already traveling. It's traveling all over the place. I know it went up to Polotsk last year, and they had thousands of school children seeing it on display there. And then it came to the National Library in Minsk. It's absolutely it's traveling, and today it's on display at the event that they've got there today in Minsk.
I was only going to suggest, I don't know how feasible this is because it's a costly exercise, but if there are sufficient, it could come here to the Ben-Uri, and then you could publicize it through all the Jewish media and everything. And I'm sure people would want to go and see it because it's like the ones we saw from Auschwitz, you know, these drawings and paintings.
No, absolutely. I mean, there's every possibility we could have copies of them. So, you know, but because to bring them here would be really complex.
Yeah.
But it's a good idea. Yeah, absolutely. They should
also be part of an education program.
Absolutely, absolutely. We have, I don't know who you are. We have a hand up, 181384.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, my name is Charles Citrin, and I'm calling from Miami.
Hello.
Hello. I'm wondering, what is the state of the Jewish community in Mohilev on the Dnieper, if you know?
Mogilev we don't get so involved with, but I don't know, Tamara, do you know much about the Mogilev community?
Well, I know that there is a community they are connected to the Progressive Synagogue, Finchley Progressive Synagogue in London. They are developing pretty good, like the one in Vitebsk, for example.
Yeah,
maybe Vitebsk is more developed because the Vitebsk has they have their own magazine, which is called Mishpocha. And there are researchers there who really deeply researched Jewish history of Vitebsk. Published several books about it. I don't know about Mogilov, whether they published anything, but I know the community is doing pretty well, pretty good. And there is a course at the university in Mogilov, non-Jewish lecturers, professors, developed a course on teaching about the Holocaust at the Mogilov University. That's what I know.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Welcome.
Enid.
Hi, good morning. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts, and I was wondering if the Together Plan was doing anything with the high school in Dyatlava, which has the teachers and students made a Jewish museum inside the high school of the town. And I didn't know whether you were working with them or not.
We're not, but we would love to. Do you have a connection to them?
I do. My family was from Jettel at the time. And I do have some, I think I still have the email addresses, but Batya Cohen in Israel, who Tamara knows, her family is also from that town, her mother Fanya, and she is definitely in touch. And it was fascinating to see all of these non-Jews build out a room to teach their students about the Holocaust.
Absolutely. And these are the sorts of things that we need to know about, because we will put them on our heritage route. That's the whole point. The point is that we want to actually plot out where all this activity is happening. And because there's also, that's also happening in Ilya, where there is a school where the students, non-Jewish students, have also created a room with the support from a survivor who's also in Israel. So it's really important that we know about these so that we can, well, also there's a possibility that they might want to have our traveling exhibition, that we can, connect, that you build these connections, which is one of the reasons why we're called the Together Plan. People shouldn't be working in silos, they should be talking to each other.
So one other point that goes with this is that there was before COVID, there is a fire station that is the only surviving building that was a synagogue, from what I understand. I've seen it. And the people who run the museum were desperately trying to buy the building and convert it back to make a real Jewish museum to be on that cultural road. I can get the information from that. How do I get it to you?
So if you can put your, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my email. In fact, anybody's very welcome to email me into the chat. And you can just email me.
Great.
Well, I'm in good contact with Yelena Radomskaya, who runs that museum, who is a teacher from high school #1, and with Lena Abramchik, who is now working at the museum, local history museum. Well, so Dyatlava is really a good place to connect to the Together Plan, because they have been doing it for more than 10 years already. And it's their own initiative, to do it. In fact, they started, I believe, in 2003, when I invited one teacher from that high school to our first conference seminar for school teachers from Belarus on the Holocaust. So, yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions? Evie, it's very nice to see you. I loved all of your emails with all your information. I was absolutely unmute. I can't hear you. Your story was fascinating. In fact, at some point I want to be in touch with you about it.
There we go. I'm just so impressed. My husband was watching most of the time with me. I'm just so impressed with what you do and the direct communication. Anytime I've asked a question, you've answered it immediately. And I just admire what you're doing.
Thank you. I very much, as at some point, it's on my to-do list that we need to be in touch, because you've got so much information, and I think it's really, really important. I want to be able to capture. So I really appreciate words, and I appreciate your connection as well. And this is what it's all about. It's all about being connected. It's all about sharing and everybody's got a nugget. And when you put it all together, it becomes very powerful. It's like the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. You clearer picture. So, you know, I really appreciate you, you know, being in touch, and I appreciate that you're recognizing that what we're trying to do, it's a very big task. We have a very big task.
Absolutely.
But, you know, we're on it. We're doing it. So somehow. So,
well, onward.
Onward, exactly. Onward. You know, we will conquer. We're getting there. So, yeah. Yeah. All I can ask is everybody stay with us and keep following us. Keep talking to me. You know, I'm hugely grateful for all the support that you all bring, because I couldn't do this without, you know, all of your support. I am hoping to be traveling again in the States later this year. So I haven't yet planned my trip, but you know, I'm interested to come and give talks, to meet with people. So, you know, be in touch with me if you feel there's somewhere in your vicinity where, if you're in the States, where I could, you know, come and meet with you and give a talk and spread the word. I'd be most grateful. As I said, tomorrow we'll be giving a talk about the Museum of Jewish Resistance and the partisans. Hopefully it's going to be on March the 5th, but it will go onto our events page on the website shortly. And as I said, this afternoon, for you it will be evening, for some of you it will be morning, I will be shortly posting the event that has just taken place in Minsk, with over 250 people and all these dignitaries. And that, because of the work that we're doing and the support that we get from you, is empowering people there to do this sort of thing. So it's working. You know, the Together plan is coming together, and I'm very excited about what we can achieve together. It's important.
Can you post your email in the chat, please?
I have. You should have seen it. It should be. You should have. Can you not see it? It's Debra.Brunner@thetogetherplan.com. But you can also get me through the contact on the email, on the website as well. If you send a message, if you can't see if you can't see it in the chat, which you should be able to, you can always get to me through the website, through the contact page. So I think I'll let you go. It's a very important day. I really appreciate you being here. This has been recorded, so if anybody does want a copy of the recording, again, please just email us. I'll be happy to share it with you. Have a good day, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deborah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sadly, it was wonderful.
Thank you.
Can I say it that way? Your presentation was fantastic. Really.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you. It means a lot. It really does. Take care, everyone. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat.
Thank you.